Okay, so warm welcome everyone to our conversation. Apologies for the 12-minute delay. We are pleased to have a conversation on religion and conflict resolution. And today we are privileged to have in our midst a research academic who is going to be our main member of panel for this interesting discussion. Without much ado, I would want us to invite Alex for him to tell us a bit about himself and how he got to such a research journey. So Alex, if you can hear me, please unmute yourself. Tell us a bit about yourself and how you got onto this journey.
Thank you so much, Fred. Where do I start? I'm just in my final 6 months of PhD. It has been a really long journey, 4 years of PhD program. But in my professional background, I've been working with international organizations, especially with FCDO, the UK Foreign Affairs branch. To do with the aid. So what I've been doing, I used to do, have been mainly research and consultancy to provide insight on programs. They have their funding, but I also been working with some other international NGOs such as International Alert, International Rescue Committee, and Mercy-Corps, especially on the capacity building in different parts of Africa. As a personal background, I originally come from Congo, Eastern Congo. Congo being an interest, this is why I'm researching on Congo. I've developed that personal link because of it is where I come from. I came to the UK probably 23 years ago, fleeing persecution, fleeing conflict in the DRC. I come from a community of cattle herder in South Kivu, and Eastern Congo has been really the hub of this conflict. You can imagine it would no one would be spared. Personally, I've lost probably I've lost 13 people from my mother side and father side killed of the conflict in the DRC. So both personal and professional interest. That's led to researching what I'm researching now.
All right, thank you very much, Alex. So before we ask you to come in, I'm privileged to have my introduction that Charles kindly sent to us. So I'll go through the introduction that will set the basis for the conversation, and then we'll give you the platform to tell us about religion and conflict resolution, with DR Congo being the spotlight, what the research points us to. Now, religion and conflict resolution. It is often claimed that religion causes conflict and war. It is true that sometimes deeply held beliefs can lead to clashes, and there have been many wars that were caused by disputes over religion and beliefs. In fact, if we take a look at the global hotspots, such as Syria, Iraq, Libya, Yemen, South Sudan, Somalia, Afghanistan, Ukraine, the DRC, and Central African Republic, Myanmar, Palestine, and Sri Lanka, attention has focused on the role of religion in contributing to strife in these areas, even where religion may not be the root cause of the conflict. However, for many people, there are diverse reasons to assume that religious leaders could be a resource for peace building and conflict prevention and resolution. This is the thinking, and the cornerstone of such is the golden rule, the ethics of reciprocity. Treat others as you would like others to treat you, positive or directive form. Do not treat others in ways that you would not like to be treated, negative or prohibitive form. What you wish upon others, you wish upon yourself. Empathetic, or responsive form. The golden rule is the principle of treating others as you want to be treated. Various expressions of this fundamental moral rule are to be found in the tenet of most religious and creeds through the ages, testifying to its universal applicability. Hence, the appeal to religion and engaging with its multiple facets to address the interlocking issues like racism, inequality, insecurity, deprivation, marginalization, institutional malfunctioning, state failure, global dynamics of dependency, which often are directly related or even cause to conflict and peace. There is enough evidence to indicate that by virtue of their theology and belief in the golden rule, individuals, religious or political leaders, or communities that embrace a religious discourse, symbolism, or institution can carry out or justify peace effort by their faith. We say this though very much aware of the converse. We are also intellectually cognizant of the fact that religion is not always relevant in conflict or peace dynamics, but overall, religion connects with peace in the following ways. One, the idea of human dignity and the common humanity of all. This thinking is derived from the notion that all are created in the image of the divine and we are all human. This is foundational to true peace. Religious concepts of redemption and forgiveness underpin key post-conflict reconciliation efforts, providing resources to help societies heal the shattering consequences of war. Two, interfaith protests. This is the natural outgrowth of the principles of faith. This resistance to oppression and injustice, for example, stems out of faith principles to love our neighbor as ourselves, or do good to those who desperately hate you and despise you. Interfaith protests often, therefore, focus attention on peace forms of resistance to oppression and injustice, inequality, racial bias, and others. Think of religious denunciation of the practices of racism, apartheid, and segregation as sins in the US and South Africa, or religious effort to halt ethnic cleansing in Darfur. Three, religion as an ecosystem of influential civil society, communities, and institutions. Religion by force of will in most societies is an influencer. It is either the institution of the elites and the governing, or it is a refuge and enabler for those protesting. As a result, religion is often seen as representing unifying values that transcend disputed issues. They are often among the most stable, most trusted entities in crisis venues, capable of contributing to mediating disputes. Think of the accomplishments of religious groups like the Black Lives Matter after the acquittal of George Zimmerman in the shooting death of Trayvon Martin back in 2012. Three female Black organizers, Alicia Garza, Patrisse Cullors, and Opal Tometi, created this Black-centered political will and movement to protest inhuman treatment of Black people in the hands of authorities. The movement grew nationally in 2014 after the death of Michael Brown in Missouri and Eric Garner in New York. Now it has established itself as a worldwide movement, particularly after the death of George Floyd at the hands of police in Minneapolis, Minnesota. Most recently, Black Lives Matter has spearheaded demonstrations worldwide, protesting police brutality and systematic racism that overwhelmingly affect the Black community. It is the ethic of reciprocity at work here. How about the community of St. Edigio? Among those achievements include successfully brokering in 1992 peace agreement in Mozambique after 30 years of civil war. Other examples are interfaith reconciliation efforts in South Africa, Muslim-Christian coalitions in the aftermath of the Balkan conflict, and ecumenical Christian efforts in Colombia. Several human rights groups in the US and NGOs worldwide working hard to ensure peaceful coexistence in many volatile situations. Number 4, and the last one, the essential role of local organizations, NGOs, and international entities in development. Local and international religious entities play a large and often unappreciated role in promoting education, delivering healthcare services, and addressing poverty, all of which create conditions and hope, support to the needy, and stability conditions without which peace cannot flourish. In almost every conflict region in the world, interfaith efforts have contributed to resolving or avoiding disputes, as well as improving the conditions of millions caught up in civil strife. It is often the very existence of interfaith groups that inspires and encourages others to move in the direction of peace, mutual cooperation, and reconciliation. What we explore today is what combination of actors, claims, external factors, and religious, and in this case, Christian features that can be brought to bear on an otherwise tense, volatile, and even violent situations to tame it or even extinguish it. So welcome all of you to Religion and Conflict Resolution with the Inter-Ethnic Conflict Resolution with DRC in the spotlight. So we now want to welcome Alex to take us through what is the research pointing us to when it comes to religion and conflict with DRC in the spotlight. Thank you.
Thank you. What a fascinating introduction. You really sum up what's the cutting edge research area now, looking at religion and peace. Firstly, I'm really grateful for this opportunity to be part of a series of these events. I've attended one for this series of this event, which I found incredible, and really for coming from diaspora context and looking at Africa, I thought, this is what we need. We need this conversation to keep going. Anyway, let me start to give you a little bit of background of the DRC so that you can understand what my research is trying to respond to. Congo conflict is really written about a lot and considered to be the deadliest since the World War II. I know, of course, now what is being talked about is Ukraine, but of course, as the saying that if a tree in the forest, no one hear it falling, does not mean that tree has not fallen. The war in Congo has really had an impact on the whole region. Between 1998 to 2006, there were 6 countries that were involved in Congo conflict. 100,000 people have been displaced. We have Uganda and Kenya hosting the largest number of refugees, refugees from Congo. There is also the big headline is the fact that Congo has 122 armed groups, only in the eastern region. For those who may not be familiar with the Congo, is a huge country. There's 2 Congo, the Congo Brazzaville and the Congo Kinshasa, and we are talking about Congo Kinshasa. So it's really huge. It is now the 2nd largest country in Africa, after Sudan has now divided into 2. Before it used to be Sudan and then Algeria, then the DRC, but DRC has moved up to become 2nd largest country in Africa. So it is really size of the whole Western Europe. Basically from east, where I come from, to the west, it is a distance equal to London and Moscow. You can imagine, flying from London to Moscow is about 2 hours and a half, or 3 actually. So other background, really, some of the things we often see in the media are 2, really, especially in the Western media here, is a title that has been given to the DRC being the world capital of rape. There have been especially stories of rape being used as a weapon of war. Another headline has been similar to Sierra Leone, talking about blood minerals. Congo is one of the probably most rich country in terms of natural resources, and therefore, although I don't agree with such headline in the Western country, which makes really blessing of Africa into much more a curse. people who benefit from minerals are much more corporations. Those armed groups have no capacity really to call it, and as many scholars often write about, that these armed groups are actually emerging because of our minerals, but that is really untrue. When in my field research study, I could see how those armed groups are incredibly not so equipped, but of course doesn't mean that their violence is proportional to how ill equipped they are. So what have been response, and that's where I'm leading to why I'm researching this. International peace building have failed. In the introduction, the Reverend mentioned about Afghanistan. So Congo has been one of the guinea pigs of the last 30 years, post-Cold War model to intervene into conflict area. And Congo is one of them. Congo, Colombia, and East Timor and Afghanistan. So that model of international peace building has been really based on building, what they call state building, focusing on top down. So Congo has benefited quite a lot. So today we have the most expensive UN troops in the DRC. They spend 1.5 billion a year. So this is a contribution from actually you too. Your tax are contributing to the UN in the DRC, because the British government from the start have been contributing around 200 million a year. Last time when I written to the British government, they said that they are contributing 50 million, but I know it's often between 50 to 200 million every year. What else? The EU tried their own peace building. So Congo was a beneficiary of the first ever EU military intervention, although that has ended, but it is a record. So as I said, the peace effort has been really kind of assuming that by working with national actors, bringing them at the negotiation tables, then you will produce a peace. But of course, in a corrupted place like that, those individuals, the actors in the peace negotiation, often divide themselves roles, and the conflict at the grassroots level remain. One of the other reasons why peace has not succeeded with the international model is really the culture of international actors itself is an obstacle to solution. Like West Africa, Ghana, in Nigeria, Congo has incredible social cultural asset of traditional leaders. And you would wonder, with all this customary authority, why they have now stepped up to actually do something. So many studies, especially in Belgium and in Holland, showing again that these traditional leaders seem entangled in the conflict themselves. They are social actors as well. So again, that's another side that it has failed. So existing scholars often talk about the consensus. They have kind of like a consensus to say, like, the DRC central government itself, institutions are so weak, failed, corrupted, and they cannot really address the root causes of conflict, or even impose rule of law and authority to regulate a relationship between ethnic groups who are fighting. So I'm giving you that background to show you why I have focused on church. Now, the elephant in the room. So there is so much gap on why there is no church leadership, the role of church leadership. Where are churches? Like in Rwanda, where genocide has happened, Congo has probably, I would say over 94% people are Christian, they claim to be Christian. So there are churches all everywhere. The Catholic Church is incredibly powerful, and it was a part of the pillars of the colonial authority. And since then, it has its influence is still there in the politics. Protestant church were sidelined during colonial time. It was really kind of like a struggle between Britain and Belgium. British missionaries, Swedish missionaries, especially with the Pentecostal churches, and Norwegian missionaries. But they all focused in the East because the Catholics who are Belgian, the Belgian colonialists, they were not so happy with the Protestant. Protestants at that time, Protestants were incredibly so vocal in terms of anti-slavery, anti-colonial power. So ever since they were not so influential in politics. Anyway, I'm trying to give you just a little background to share why I focus on churches, and there's no much of a study of what they are doing there. So really my aims is to understand and explain the role of religious leaders. We're talking about pastors and bishops in deterring violence and thereby to edify the peace. I'm saying deterring is actually creating conditions for peace to flourish, rather than actually the mediation itself. But even just to be able to speak out when evil are happening. Focusing on church leaders, really many studies, as the introduction mentioned about it, many studies have looked at institutions in the community, in the faith, but are very little on religious leaders as individuals, and how their faith and ideas and experiences or prophetic teachings really, or a Christian identity itself and the Christian values, which were read in the introduction, and how those can actually be able to play a role in conflict. So my research question, 3 research questions I have is, what is the role, if any, of Catholics and the Protestant church leaders in the ethnic identity conflict in Eastern Congo? I've made sure I'm focusing on ethnic identity to be specific, because there are also political conflict like other countries, political conflict. So I'm focusing on ethnic identity, which very, very much is really at the heart of what's wrong with the Congo. Second question is, how do the public in the political statement, really by this, sorry, I should finish this, the question. How do public in the political statement and rationale of church leaders contribute to deterring or inspiring, or deterring or inspiring, edifying peace, contributing to peace or deterring violence? That's what I meant to say. What is their concern really, and how their concern are expressed? And later, if there is no role, I wanted to understand what potential is there for Christian church leadership to intervene in promoting peaceful cohabitation between ethnic groups in Africa, and especially in Congo. I have completed a field study as part of this 4 years PhD. I did ethnography in the DRC, because it's the country that I've been working in as part of my consultancy work. It was quite difficult to access key people, to access bishops, prominent religious leaders across the country. Sorry, mainly in Eastern Congo and Kinshasa, Bukavu and Goma. I did 3 months there, really observing, attending churches, especially in conflict zone area, to even look at the message, how the message is transformed in terms of focusing on responding to violence, which may have happened yesterday. It was really quite challenging, covering conflict area and where churches are operating. Other method I've used is qualitative interviews with these prominent leaders. I've decided to really focus on prominent leaders, those who have influence in society. There are many, many churches everywhere, but not all of them have influence in society. They may have influence in their church, but not necessarily people who are recognizable by everyone whose capacity and political influence is incredibly well known. I also did archive. Catholic Church is very well organized with archive from 100 years. I was covering the time between 1990 to now. They allowed me to access their archives at the SENCO. SENCO is the top institution that represent the network of bishops, the Catholic bishop in the country. Online focus group, WhatsApp. I managed to access WhatsApp group of 150 evangelical Protestant church leaders. Again, very well known, some of them who are theologians themselves and also scholars in Christian studies. As you can hear, my case study is really focusing on Roman Catholic Church and Protestant churches. When I talk about Protestant, it really focuses we have three main ones which still have a link with the mainline churches. But many of these churches are changing to become evangelical, charismatic Pentecostal churches. Dr. Fred, if you don't mind to share the first photo, please. Is that possible?
Is it in view?
That's right. That's one.
Okay.
Yes. Is it possible to enlarge that?
Okay.
On presenting next to that further? No.
You want me to
as presenting slideshow.
Okay.
Slideshow. Yeah. That's right.
Is it better?
That's right, yes. One of the framework I've decided to use, which will be familiar to any other viewers from other parts of Africa. I thought really, as I'm using ethnography, I wanted to describe the significance of religious beliefs in our Congolese society. By doing that, I really challenge the secular understanding that, well, why you are expecting the normative position of church leaders, and why you're expecting that they should be in a position to provide the peace. So I wanted to represent the background of religious beliefs in society as such as Congo, especially in the village area where these political leaders who are often part of a conflict come from, and how the religious identity is incredibly powerful to them. So the photo here is a drawing really of a village heart, which has so many representations, spiritual representation. If you go to the second image, please. And this house, actually, the drawing is based on a house of former president of Congo. I've managed to access two of our old houses. They are now abandoned. But what fascinated me was how this represents the mind of many African leaders. So you see in the bottom, you have a conference room where he used to receive dignitaries. But upstairs, there is an amazing, beautiful room which tented with the window tinted as a chapel, a Catholic chapel. That's where he used to receive a priest or a pastor. Then next to that, another room that a Catholic priest or pastor could not access is a room where he used to receive a traditional leader's advisor. And there will be providing him with some other traditional wisdom, and he has to be committed to that as well. There was another room which has traditional medicine. Again, he will meet with a traditional healer and so on. There was another room with which was even a family did not have access to You have to go kind of internal. It has the guns. That's where escape route. So you can understand that there are so many resources of protection. So many resources of protection here. But that is metaphorically is the upstairs, where therefore is almost like his head. Whereas when he goes down to meet with dignitaries at the bottom conference room, he's an international modern leader who engage with using modern standard. So the modern house plan really is a cross section. It represents a multifaceted mindset of a political actor in the DRC, or maybe in Africa too, influenced by a religious and traditional practice. So upstairs, but operating publicly a secular and a Western life downstairs. So the physical representation of two worlds in the mind of a one person, which express really a complex and challenging that facing the international actors who are mediating conflict. So do they understand these individuals that they're engaging with? Thank you. I will ask later to show another picture. So I'm using another framework of an amazing scholars called the Philpott Daniel Philpott. He suggests that in his latest book called Gold Century, he suggests that religious actors as autonomous social actors in a system of consensual independence, the more religion will serve as a multiplier for important social and political goods, including democratization, development, which Dr. Fred has been really fascinated about in his book, and peacemaking and reconciliation. So what Philpott is saying is, if religious leaders have some sort of independence from political institutions, from ethnicity, but he's suggesting some sort of a consensual independence with the political institutions. So that's really one of our framework I'm using, plus the house metaphor I've just showed you to represent the mindset of religious leaders. Now, moving on to give you just an idea of the significance of church leaders in the DRC, in society. This series being church and society, it really kind of it makes a stronger point here. And here I would also wanted to point out their potentials in peace building before I tell you what I'm finding. Church leaders are part of, as I said earlier, they were part, especially Catholic Church, they were part of the pillars of colonial power. Currently, the last 20 years, they have been leading election process. Last elections, before even the elections were announced, the Church Observatory had already given their view on who won election, although it wasn't what they declared, but they already had thousands of observers across the country. This is church. They lead the National Election Commission. Now you can imagine how such a position become questionable. In a part of that role, they become in serious conflict. Of course, not violent, but as Protestant and Catholic Church, often they're fighting to get that role. And whichever government is there will try to make a pastor or a bishop who may be able to side with them. So they have an amazing budget to lead the National Election Commission, so in millions of dollars. Churches in the DRC are formally considered as the main structure really that mobilize masses. During my field research, I was shocked when I was speaking to a professor there. He said to me they have conducted a survey in Eastern Congo where conflicts are. They ask people if you are under attack of armed groups, who would you call first? 70% said they would call their pastor. They would call their bishop. That's instead of police, instead of someone else. So you can understand how incredibly powerful they are. And one of the things I've witnessed personally is that some politician will be paying for crowds at the airport. They'll be paying for crowd in the street. But a church leader, a pastor, will gather hundreds of people in a very short time advertisement. The most powerful political position, a Catholic Church, has been always part of either with the government or opposing the government. That's it. It's really there. In 1990, a dictator who was there, Mobutu, Church really weakened him quite a lot. And similarly to Joseph Kabila, who left last 3 years. Again, the church and international actors were incredibly instrumental to get him out. They also provided public services, schools especially, but all these public services are not, faith-led or live by Christian values. They are secular, almost a kind of like a model of business. But it may impress you that how come they are into that, but still they cannot. They still there's a paradox. They still this environmental peace, also of violence. Protestant church are relatively well established and economically, and they have also, especially they have inherited missionaries' role and related to privilege. It was interesting. I went to visit one of our. Actually, he's probably the top. He was equivalent to Desmond Tutu in South Africa. He's the one who was heading the Truth and Reconciliation Commission. I went to meet with him, and what was fascinating for me, the same house which I went to ask a lift when I was probably 12. I went to ask a lift to missionaries. Is the house which this guy lived in. So no longer the white missionary there. Now we have the black missionaries who are acting like white missionaries. Many of them tend to exploit various advantage in their interaction with the politics. Many political leaders pay for chairs in churches. They pay for many things, or even churches. They build the churches, so that it becomes kind of an interaction with the pastors in certain ways. Dr. Fred, I'm about to finish. If you could show another image there.
Okay.
Is
it this one?
No, up. Yes, this one. This is a drawing I've done also to capture an amazing concept in the DRC, which they often use, called a church in the middle of village. When you hear that concept in DRC, it's quite well known. It really means that the church should be neutral, should reconcile people, should be a mediator, should use the evangelical principle, as we heard of that in introduction. So church, instead of this principle, which actually not necessarily Congolese, is coming from Europe in medieval time with Constantine, who emperor, who used to work with the church, and at that time the expression came as a way to show that church is neutral, but actually church was at the service of the emperor in those years. So here in Congo, two things which you can retain here is that the expression is used to justify the church involvement in politics. For example, the church get involved, for example, in mediating political conflict, and which they do succeed actually in mediating national political conflict. When they get involved, when they are in opposition with the government, at that time the government use the same expression to say, look, you should be a church in the middle of the village. You should be neutral. Jesus was not involved in politics as you are. Okay, if you could show following image. Hold on a second.
This one?
Yes, please. Yes. Okay. Thank you. So what I'm finding now is that really this interaction between church and the state became how I can explain a church ineffectiveness in peace context. Though the church really being subservient of has produced many outcomes. So firstly, Catholic Church and Protestant Church tend to be in a constant battle to occupy an allocated role within the government institutions. Secondly, the position of church leaders in peace building tend to be aligned with the government policy or populist politics as well. And consequently, the church, the role of church leaders in conflict resolution become either absent or their credibility become a question or untrusted. Third and last, as politics has tended to involve various degrees of tribalism and the political actors that are both members of particular church and specific ethnic groups, church leadership very frequently embed their racial and ethnic prejudice of their respective community. If you could move to the next image, please. And to finish, my last two images I want to choose, I'm coming up with this concept, which I think is quite a novel approach that really looks at an account of both positive and negative influence of church leaders in peace. The explanation I'm trying to give here in middle is the ambiguous response of church leaders. Last week, well, actually no, last week, a few days ago, I was on call with Dr. Fred and talking about what's happening in Eastern Congo. There was a huge massacre involving babies. The images were being circulated on social media. I've been waiting, now it's been seven days, waiting to hear any church leaders in the area or anywhere in Congo to actually condemn the violence or say something in a compassionate way to those who have lost their loved ones. So there is an ambiguous silence, ambiguous response to many of the issues happening there. And that explanation is what I've just given of the interplay between church and the politics. So I'm trying to provide, I've found some leaders who are quite a minority really, who kind of can be defined by the qualities upward, militancy in peace, where either they are positively neutral, they are quite probably scared that their teaching could make them unpopular. They are preaching about peace. So they tend to not say a lot, but they're actually very prayerful and worried. There are others who are kind of more talking about tolerance and no violence, but are not kind of pushing much more further in their preaching to actually talk about peace and love, among the different community groups. There are others, sadly, who kind of have a public opposition of violence. Sadly, those ones, they really become very unpopular. I can tell you some of those I interviewed, the two of them, they are now arrested because of all their teaching of peace. I've met with the bishop who he went with his dress and he showed me how he survived grenades because of working for peace. And for underneath going to militancy in peace in violence, there are many, many church leaders, especially around the second position. I'm calling it dog whistle, is where you use a lot of discourses, you use a lot of speeches that only Congolese will recognize. Maybe Ghanaian will not know what you're talking about. Maybe Nigerian will not know what you're talking about. Maybe European will not know what you talk about. But actually, you are inciting violence, but not actually saying it. There is no evidence that it could be found that you're actually inciting violence. Maybe I want to go much in details about that. Maybe last image so I can finish on there. Thank you. And the last finding I have is really representation of the framework which I started talking to you about in the house metaphor. Now, I'm finding something which I'm kind of developing this kind of framework which I'm calling the multiple allegiancy, which is in the Congolese religious leaders' mindset. The framework really refer to a religious syncretism, an expression of the compartmentalization of multiple identity that these leaders will define themselves under. So really the onion concept to visualize these different compartments and allegiances that form the different layers of a mindset of a typical Congolese church leader. And the image illustrates the degree of commitment and priority such identity, starting from a core of ethnic identity that for many, quietly but insistently influence all thought. So you can see ethnicity in the middle. For pastors who are following us, this is what's really wrong in many parts of Africa. This is why Christianity has not produced positive changes in terms of conflict. So the ethnicity and tribalism is at the core of this onion. The second layer is security, which is physiological, psychological, and the physical security. People are very, very worried about their future, and hence why searching for protection in different ways. And the second layer is, especially in time of Congo, I don't know about other parts of Africa, but is the political power. There is a constant, really ambition for political power in the church context, and actually that also play in the church leadership conflict. The economic power is another one, which is another layer that people are wearing. This, you can imagine this as a jacket. And the Christianity is really a jacket we all see, is what people are wearing. Your Christianity identity. You're wearing a cross. You're wearing, any futures that present a church, a Christian person will show that. Being prayerful, but actually those other identities, which is other jacket underneath, are much more powerful than the one outside. So until this onion is the other way around, really it is very difficult to produce leaders who can act possibly like a Desmond Tutu or like Martin Luther King in their kind of example. Thank you. I know I've taken so long than you had given me, Dr. Fred. I'm sorry for that.
That's fine. I think I can stop sharing now.
Yes.
Let's appreciate by typing something in there. Let's appreciate the work that Alex has done. Thanks so much. I think we all appreciate the amount of work that you've done. Now the floor is open, and I want to ask you as many questions as possible. I have a few, but I can see to others if anybody wants to go first. It could be a question, a suggestion. It could be a comment.
Good evening, everyone.
Hi.
Good evening, yes.
I am Pastor Joshua. Sorry, my camera is turned off. I'm sort of arranging. So I would like to say that it is true that conflict is inevitable in humanity, but regardless, Christianity has found a divide itself, and several leaders have used their position to manipulate the circumstances of their environment for the purpose of status. In order to enable Africa become a better place, it's going to start with our individual creation of awareness to other people who are feeble-minded on how these things operate or why it is done in such a way. Most times, these bishops and the other religious leaders have been settled behind the curtains in order for things to take place. Let's use Nigeria as a case study. Sometime 2014, 2015, during the contesting election, a pastor in Redeem Church, I don't know if you know Redeemers, it's a big church, that's RCCG in Nigeria. A pastor declared that he was running as the vice president for Nigeria, so it needs all the votes. Initially, the contestant was not going to win because he ruled Nigeria in the military regime and failed woefully and was very brutal. So because people have viewed it that, okay, a pastor has come on board, it means that because a pastor is present, this is a better hope for Nigeria and things will turn out to be good for us. They ended up winning because of the pastor, and based on the fact that Redeem has the largest number of church members in Nigeria, most of their members voted. And since then, it has been held for everyone. You are in Nigeria, you are not in Nigeria. As long as you have someone back home, you will definitely feel the bad news coming. And he has been able to use his status to overcome what people think or say of the things he has done as a politician or a ruler. And he has also made it known that irrespective of the conflicts that is ongoing, is also a human. So we should not use the status of him being a pastor to judge or rate whatever he has done. That him too is a human and everybody has a sin of their own. And this has not only changed the way Christianity is viewed worldwide. Christianity has now become a game or a means for other people to just do what they want and escape it in the name of they will be forgiven. So all of these are a factor to why the religion is suffering a backlash and why conflicts can never leave Africa, because each time a conflict arises, the religion, the religious leaders are attached to it in a way or the other.
Yes.
And the case of Congo, I think I've once heard of a case of Congo. I believe why the war in Congo is still ongoing is because of their unwillingness to allow the youth come on board and allow people decide how they want to live in Congo. Basically, if you decide that you are not fully as religious as other people are, it's going to be very difficult for you to relate or flow in the social circle of the people in Congo. And aside that, it's very demeaning to realize that those who stand for the truth are taken away from the spotlight because they stand for the truth. All of these are what is causing a setback in our growth in faith and also our growth to development, to stop being regarded as underdeveloped. Because if you want to take away the problem in Africa, which is bad governance and religious oppression, you would realize that Africa really has a lot of things that can make it a better place. So to draw a summary, the presentation was very good, and I was able to pick that those who are in touch with the government are definitely not for the people. They are standing by the government. That is why they are with the government. And the conflicts are mostly infused by indecision of others to accept the circumstances in their environment.
Yes.
Thank you so much, Pastor J. Omeke. I've got Michael's hand up. So Michael, please take the floor.
Right, thank you. And thank you for the presentation. There are a few things, I mean, quite a few bits, things that I've picked up on. And there's one question that I want to actually put to everyone because I found that quite fascinating, relating to our traditional leaders. On the basis of the fact that our traditional leaders, well, they used to operate and we used to work very well under that leadership. But since so-called civilization comes in, that seems to be have been annulled entirely. So my point is, why haven't we, as Africans, been able to harness our traditional leadership when it comes to in terms of having to harness that to get it integrated to where, because I think in a way it's like the premise from where I'm coming from is that I think when Westernization in terms of religion came into our system, we were made to believe that everything that we had was not good, which then made us throw everything, throw the bathwater with the baby out. Yeah, which literally in a way caused us to throw some of the wholesome things because which currently you find permeating through our governance in a way. When it comes to our traditional leaders, they still wield the power and the influence. That although we talk about our constitution and whatever, they still in their traditional aspects still wield the authority and still have the influence because that aspect still seems to still work, regardless of the new or modernism of our, should I say, civilization or civilized way of operation. But still that primitive, so-called primitive aspect still operates. So why haven't we been able to harness or possibly even synergize that to work out something that works for us to make it effective? And I would like to hear from everyone up here what you think in terms, because that's my observation. And I want to, yeah.
Thank you so much, Michael. I think I'll try and attempt a response. I think if we look at the onion ball model or framework that Alex is trying to propose, if you look at the place where ethnicity sits, I think that our traditional authorities could also be connected there in one way or the other. Yes. And like Michael rightly put across, that the introduction or the westernization of the Christian religion in Africa came in and said, okay, all that you had traditionally was idolatry, so throw it away. And people who are conversant with the Christian church in Ghana will acknowledge the fact that within the Protestant churches, you couldn't mount the pulpit if you were not in suit. So basically, you can't put on a Ghanaian cloth or African cloth to mount the pulpit. I mean, I am called Fred, which I joke by saying it is a colonial legacy. But within the church system, when the child was being baptized, they then make a decision that you need to have a name that sounds biblical. So in Ghana, if it's not a biblical name, then maybe a name from Britain. How I got by my name Fred. So the point I'm trying to put across is that today's world, as far as our as far as our traditional rulers are concerned, is that based on the case that I know about Ghana and their role, whether complicit directly or indirectly, with the menace of Galamsey, they have also lost a lot of credibility in terms of traditional rulership. And it appears that the traditional leadership, the Christian leadership, and then the media fraternity, what they've been able to do is to now team up with political authority. So basically, what is happening is that you don't cause me problems, and I don't cause you problems. Though we know that we have a duty towards our people, as far as all of us are together and we are happy, so shall it be. And I'm sure I've not provided enough. So anybody can follow up on Michael's question, or if somebody also will have a different question, please feel free to put across. And I mean, in the meantime, Alex, I wanted to ask this question.
Yes.
I mean, is your research pointing out the fact that the Christian message has not been able to engage with our ethnic idiosyncrasies? Is that the positioning? That yes, we have just as a robe, so we are wearing a kind of a Christian waterproof jacket. And then, so the core to our day-to-day life is not really kind of influenced by our Christian values, but rather it's like you need that on your CV to say that you're also Christian. Because I mean, the numbers are huge. 94% of the people in Eastern Congo professing to be Christians. And the way the Bible talks about unity, we should not just be peaceful amongst ourselves, but we should be the symbol of peace in our society.
Yes.
And then the results of that survey, where people will say that when they're in trouble, 70% of the people in the country will call their pastor or their bishop first, instead of calling the security agency. I think that is very alarming. I don't know whether you have a response to that, please.
Yes, okay. Two things really. Missionaries' message was mainly around life after death. So Christianity became almost like a life insurance. What will I do when I die? It isn't really dealing with the existential issues. That's really what I'm finding in terms of what people how people claim to be Christian. And when you ask them about what about so and so, and this is really not at the agenda. You can see the focus is an insurance, is another protection, is another layer of protection. You said something really powerful about CV. That's really a well representation of that. To be no Christian in the DRC, especially academia, they were telling me, look, we are stigmatized because we think differently. We're trying to find new ideas. You are stigmatized for not being Christian enough. So it is really part of passing and being socially accepted in the DRC. To go, maybe that's my modest way to answer this moment. But to go back to Michael's comment, which it's really powerful, I guess Dr. Fred have answered this really, really beautifully. Traditional leaders are incredibly powerful too, similar to other parts of Africa too. It is a resource that has been really influenced by those dismissal of local cultural asset. They have been affected by that. Colonialism itself, it has really in Congo, I don't know about other places, they use indirect rule where they considered customary power, which were not resistant to them, as more genuine. And the customary authority, which were even a little bit resistant to them, they made them as an outsider. Hence why you hear in Congolese narratives, which other African would be surprised about. What are you talking about? You're saying your neighboring tribe is foreign. That's the narrative in Congo. So you are not accepted because the colonial authority did not accept your customary power. So traditional authority became entangled within those situations of conflict. And yet, and this is not romanticizing life before colonialism. There were so many kingdoms which were autonomous and were such a link of, in terms of conflict. They were not so powerful like in Mali or like in Benin kingdom, which are here in Nigeria or other in Ghana. There were two kingdoms, the most powerful, the Luba kingdom and the Congo kingdom, which were incredibly powerful. The others were quite relatively not so powerful kingdoms. Therefore, competition over resources were not at that level. But I'm really in agreement with the comments. It is a resource that they should be tapped into. How can we take away religious leaders who are now siding with the political leaders and the traditional leaders who are being bribed so that they can support the political campaign at the local level, or use ethnicity as a tool for political campaign. So how can these leaders be used? In fact, I didn't mention anything on the conclusion because I realized the time was going. One of the things I'm suggesting is really enculturation, religious and cultural values of peace that are found in the local traditional values. South Africa have one, and which is very recognizable in Central Africa as well, the Ubuntu, which Desmond Tutu used, despite being an Anglican bishop. Really, what was much more powerful was Desmond Tutu using both combination of a Christian message of peace and the traditional cultural asset of peace. How can we? This is really a question to all of you. I see a potential there, but is definitely dormant. Is corrupted? Is it part of a conflict similar to those religious leaders which I've been talking about?
Fantastic. Now the floor is still open. I can see a lot of you, so everybody should be able to have a chance. Comment, questions, views.
Fred, can I just add something with regard to?
Feel free.
So, sorry.
No, go ahead. We've got time. Go ahead.
Right. In terms of, I think I do like, I think I like your onion aspect that you highlighted, which also is highlighting, well, from my perspective in a way, what I think is an issue, which is an identity or, identity crisis issue that we seem to be having.
Yes.
Because just like Fred also highlighted in terms of the whole aspect, so our identity in terms of Christianity, so it depends on how we see it. It's just like how we see in terms of the shaman or the voodoo aspect. We have tried to transport or displace that same version for Christianity in a way, where we are more or less responding, well, like in Ghana, from where I come from, it's more like the fetish priest. So we are seeing religious leaders more like that, and they're playing the same role. But here we are picking it more like they're having the Christian message, but in terms of the role of where they function falls within the same aspect in terms of the fetish or fetish priest aspect. And they play the same aspect, which seems quite fascinating to me based on your results in terms of your outcome, in terms of what you're finding, that when people are asked, where would they go to in terms of their response, which is the same thing you will have if it was a fetish, which was governed and ruled by fear. So we're having the same transplanted or disposed aspect that we're having, but this one is more or less holding a Christian aspect relating to that, but the function and the role. And this is where I go back to my earlier one in terms of because the roles in a way seem to, because in our psyche, because it depends on how we see it, is how we are making it work and function. So although Christianity is talking about, because Christianity is a lifestyle, talking about changing us from within, we still see it from our spiritual fetish priest connotation aspect, and we've just displaced that with Christian leaders in a way who are literally playing the same role. And if that is what is happening, then their effectiveness is becoming more like the confused identity aspect in terms of getting to see which one or what functions each one of them should play effectively. We've just picked up one function and replaced it with another.
Yes.
But actually, they are not playing exactly the same role. And that's what I think in terms of, of my observation in terms of what possibly might be happening. And I think your outcome seems a bit interesting, which also goes to another point that I found earlier on in terms of when you're talking about religious leaders, just the same point I'm highlighting. Our religious leaders now are seen, have the issue in terms of being seen as westernized. So the benefits in terms of what we get in terms of the westernizer, Western came, they gave us schools, they gave us hospitals. Yeah, so they're expecting the same role rather than the whole message of what Christianity was about in terms of transforming and changing the life. It's not really happening. We've just displaced it with a role that functions in in our old system in a way. And this is why I'm thinking if we can get a better education to then not just put, like the Bible say, you put in the new wine on the old wine skin, but rather getting that whole, just not putting a new wine and putting an old wine skin. That's not going to work. It's going to fall apart. And that's what we are doing. And that seemingly seems not to be working. But we need to be able to get, if it is a new role, get to find this is the new function and this is what is functioning, and not getting that displacement that I think we are functioning setup. Thank you.
Brilliant stuff. Brilliant stuff. Now let's hear.
Thank you so much, Mr. Michael. And it was a nice contribution. But let's remember that before the Westerners came to Africa, Africa was way ahead in terms of technology and education, because the Greek people were educated in Timbuktu, which was an ancient temple or an ancient kingdom in the Nubian region of Africa. When the Westerners came, they actually targeted the parts of Africa that were weak, and they replaced their religion, their beliefs, and their ethics with theirs in the name of, I am teaching you something that is better. Africa has always been educated, but the difference is that Africa was not just exposed to the modus operandi in which the Westerners use in operating. The Westerners introduced Christianity as a religion to the parts of Africa that didn't know about Christianity, because Ethiopia was one of the first places that received Christianity as a religion. And Ethiopia has long been a Christian center since the time of Jesus Christ. Even though after his death, that was when it became an actual religion. It was initially a movement. So in order to answer the questions, how do we surpass the intimidation created upon us by people in religious status and traditionalists? The first way to do this is to understand the essence of their decision. Get to know why they are citing this person and why they are operating in this manner. Like the case of Nigeria, pardon me for always using Nigeria, that's where I'm from. And that is really what I know of with evidence that I can speak of. The case of Nigeria, speaking of Oba of Benin, he did something that was really commendable. During the last election, he called all his chiefs and said to them, I do not want to hear any funny story of you collecting bribe from any politician and telling the people in a particular village they must vote for this person. I want this election to be free and fair. Let's do things in a way that we know that at the end of the day, if anything goes bad, nobody will look at us and say, okay, these traditionalists were the ones that forced us or imposed voting for this person. And that actually worked because he had given them the warning. And this was because of people had spoken to him. People had created awareness to him that men would definitely make promises to you and to your people. But the question is, would they impact the promises they have laid down when they come into power? You have to use your past to assess what your future would be like. Because if you keep making decisions based on promises and hopes given to you, you would end up running the same circle and receiving the same results without awareness that you are going through this detriment. And for the case of the pastors, I believe because of the influence of Twitter and other social medias on the internet, people have started to realize that being a spiritual leader in the name of Jesus, or probably you represent a particular religion, does not mean that you actually come in the name of truth. You could occupy that position and be possessed by a demon to operate. And if many people fail to understand this, then we need to commit things to the hands of God for them to become aware of the circumstances that await them. Just like this past election in Nigeria, people were told if you vote for us again, things will become better. The pastors also spoke. But those pastors who initially pushed for this current president to be voted in, they have withdrawn from it because it backlashed on them. And the media later revealed that most of them received bribe of like 1 billion naira, 2 billion naira in order to finance their interest on this person. So when you put them in the spotlight, they want to protect their image. So in order for these pastors or other religious leaders to be cautioned and act appropriately is to expose them. When you expose what they are doing, they tend to limit the evil they're impacting on the people. So when the media decides to expose them, it creates awareness for other people to become aware that this person being a leader does not mean that they have your interests at heart. They are just after theirs. Because if you have to review it, the circumstances undergone by those people, let's say the common civilians, do not get to them because they have the money to back up whatever is supposed to come their way. So that's also a point to hold on to. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Yes, let's give room to other people. I can see Enoch there, Kwikuada, Mary, Michael has spoken. Yeah. Feel free to unmute and then share your view or questions, if any. Okay.
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yes. We can.
Sorry, my network has been on and off, so it's been quite difficult to engage. But yes, I think I got most of the presentation, which is very fascinating and interesting. By the way, I would invite you, the presenter, forgot your name, but to come to York, because York is you mentioned Constantine, and Constantine brought religion to Britain, and most of what he did is based in York. So I think you discover a lot if you didn't get to come to York in the first place. The other thing is that it's a very short contribution, that when you look at Africa, the West brought Christianity. We had our own. So we are torn between our own ways of, communicating with a higher being, supreme God, which is the traditional way of praying. And then we have got the Christianity. So I think, don't you think that also contributes to the confusion of our identities as Africans as well? For which case, you can see the picture that you showed. The president has got a Catholic room, and then he's got a fetish room. He's got so many things, and there's confusion everywhere. Whereas in the West, you can see there's only one space for such purposes.
Yes, fully agree.
Right, Alex, before you come in on that, I have listened to some theologians, and some of the firm belief, responding to Dr. Adams, that what we see in terms of what we call traditional religion, not on the level of traditional authority in terms of managing the people, but religion and what it holds. What some of these theologians think is that these things have been done in the West in the past. Talk about the extremes, human sacrifice, killing witches and wizards. I understand that the last witch in England was hanged in Norwich around 18 something. So to an extent, it appears, and if you look at the trajectory of the Christian message, right from Palestine to Babylon to Rome to Europe, and then to the UK, to the US, and the way these countries have got their fundamentals built on these religious values, you can see that there is that it leaves imprints of development, imprints of transformation. So I think our case is quite a bit complex in terms of the fact that you go a country where 94% profess the Christian faith. So all things being equal, every Sunday, you have 94% of the population sitting in the pews in churches. And the fundamental message of the Christian message is that God created us in his own image. So love God with everything you have and love your neighbor as yourself. So I don't know if you've got any response to that, because it seems to me that it's not that straightforward.
I fully, it's really all fascinating questions here and comments. I've noted them, and I'm sure I can try to incorporate this in any way possible. This last question, probably I can start with that. Personally, what I'm seeing, I wish I was a theologian. I'm reading a lot of literature and theology, but you know, without so much background, I'm really kind of avoiding to not make so much a statement there or analysis. But I'm seeing something of a very confused world, a confused society, which has embraced something that is not fully made and has pushed aside something else which their heart is connected to.
Interesting.
You become that the thing that their heart is connected to is not publicly accepted.
Right.
And the thing that they have embraced is something publicly accepted. So people live in between. And going back, zooming back to what Dr. Freda just mentioned, I will connect your comment with someone who was talking about African development. You're talking about centuries ago with the Nubian kingdom, Kushite kingdom, which really was a huge territory stretching from Khartoum to Mediterranean area and probably the whole East Africa. And when you look at it, it was kind of like some 2000 BC. Is just incredible. They fought with the Romans, and for 3 years, the Romans ended up asking a negotiation to acknowledge that, look, you know, you are an independent place. This is, we are talking about 350 AD. Now, if you go back to Mali Kingdom, Sundiata Kekita, Musa Mansa, and which are no just stories, are no legend stories, are scholarly, you know, written about, you know, they're written about evidence. And looking at those things, it tells me that maybe we shouldn't look at Africa in the context of European evolution, how they have come from the witchcraft moment, they managed to get to where they are. Maybe the whole world is not kind of like a linear model. If I'm kind of seeing much more decline of empire, decline of power, and decline of civilization, and then rise of another civilization and a rise of another power. Africa is going through their 400 years of a failure. Is now, slavery was at the coast area, but colonialism was really, really a cross and destroyed all the foundations. And I'm just wondering whether that's really where we need inspirational leaders who can be able to people like Lumumba, people like other religious leaders I'm seeing in Zimbabwe who are Christian, but are trying to accommodate some of the best things about traditional religious leadership. So something that we cannot go back. Christianity is something we have embraced and we believe in it. But we need to not be ashamed by our past. And how can we, a theology that bring back something good about African traditional religion, and then find those people who are in between. So people cannot be hiding, going to see a healer. To finish, really, even in my age, I used to go with my father in looking after cows when I was a child. And I remember that every 5 o'clock in the morning, I don't know for what reason, with a watch, he would wake up 5 o'clock in the morning, and he would use the flute, traditional flute, by singing traditional songs. And songs are about praising the land, praising the almost kind of like similar to worshiping the land too. He's talking about the beauty of a place. He's being proud. He love what he is. And at the same time, he will switch off around 6 o'clock. He will switch off to try singing in hymn Christian songs, and he will finish by prayer. I know my dad was not is not someone who would go to kind of very traditionalist, but still is a man who is combining both things in 2 hours. So I can see that's why Africa is really in very confused.
Okay, Thank you. It looks like we got to play this discussion for the theologians to come and really
Yes.
give us their perspective. Because Daniel, for instance, I know when he was in a curate, there was a time he told me he had to sit in a boat to bless the rivers around his area, so River Thames. So if this is part of the Anglican
Yes.
System in the UK, then maybe we are rather looking down on maybe some of the things that we did that really presented us and then preserved our values in the name of saying that we now give everything. So it looks like we have taken the message and the culture or the custom of the people, instead of taking the message and adapting it to our system for us to be able to prevail and live. Now, there's still room, Enoch, Mary, anybody who wants to ask a question, contribute, or follow up?
Just to be able to pick up on Alex's point in terms of the fact that maybe in terms of our progress of civilization might possibly not be linear, but might be something quite different, which is worth thinking. And I think my intriguing aspect is how, because which goes back to what Omeka also highlighted, that we've been civilized before what do you call it, the Western aspect came in. So could it be that we've gone through this process already to have been civilized, and now are we going backwards? I don't know. Yeah, so if we go, just like also what Fred said in response to Kweku's point, that up here, they went through those witchcraft and all those sort of things to now get to their civilized aspect. So if we were before civilized, could it be that we had already gone through this before, and maybe they bring in that we're retrogressing? I don't know, but that's a thought. And also, if that is the case, how come, what I find quite intriguing is that these things are playing out, but for some reason, we or our leaders don't seem to see. And I think that that's the bit that I find quite intriguing, that yes, how come it looks like we are quite oblivious or blind to it, that this is happening. Okay, they came, bring all these sort of things. How long is it going to take us for our eyes to open up to the fact that there are some wholesome aspects in what we had that we can't pick up on? So it's like you pick up now, we have this whole big industrial, or we had industrial feeding big time. And now we're reverting back to what we used to know as being organic, where we used to do them. You know, you could produce for yourself. So we are reverting backwards in a way to some things that we kicked out and said that was not okay. But now we are getting to realize that the whole big mass setup is being disastrous to us. And now we are reverting to the small units that we used to know. But yes, here we are waking up to it. So how come Africans, we are not being able to wake up to it? Does anyone has any response to that?
Yes. Yeah, I think, can you hear me?
Go on, yes, yes.
Yeah, I think what the white man did is to present what I would call the concept of duality, that it is either white or black. You know, if it is not Christianity, then everything else is bad. You know, it's primitive, it's superstitious, it's terrible. And so everything black is presented as bad, and everything white is presented as good. That concept of duality is what has affected the growth of Africa for so many years, that even in Africa or among Africans, unless we have got a white element or a white involvement, we don't even tend to believe in what we can do ourselves. I think that has really, really affected our growth, our development, mentally, and then economically and socially and socioculturally as well. So until we come to terms with the fact that this is us as Africans, this is the way we do things, then anything that we borrow from the West, if, for example, Christianity, and there are some, I've been to Elmina Castle, and you see the things that was done to the slaves, and there was a church right up there, a church right up there. and they've written scriptures on the wall, and were basically maltreating people, you know. So I think going back to the concept that you mentioned earlier on about Ubuntu concept, I've written a paper on, we used the Ubuntu concept some time ago, and that is a really phenomenal concept that we don't really embrace in Africa to actually make it our own or use that to do something. Go to China, they really appreciate Confucianism, even though there's, for me, I cannot see anything good conceptually brilliant about Confucianism, but to the Chinese, it's the best, and they've built their lives around it. You go to corporate governance system, I've taught corporate governance systems in different countries. You look at the Malaysians, they've got their own culture, and their corporate governance system, leadership systems is built around that. You go to South Korea, and for every country where you see these big companies or big corporations, there is a fundamental element of culture that the people embrace. For us, we don't embrace anything. We are neither here nor there. So I think that's one of the biggest issues that we face as Africa and Africans as Africans.
Okay, I mean, that's fascinating. I mean, we are missing some of the theologians, but I remember in one of our conversations, it was made clear, I think that was by the Bible, Lost in Translation, the formations of the Bible. One of the theologians made a point that when it comes to doctrine, Christian doctrine per se, there's nothing like any doctrine that is written in cast in stone, but we are being led, by the truth. So the point about this is that, like this conversation that we are having within the Christian context, it means that out of this conversation, there is a truth that has been exposed to us. So our next step should have been, now let's take steps to implement this truth, which is the same precepts of what Christ came to preach. But it seems that we get quite lethargic when we have to challenge the received doctrine. Because when sometimes you even compare what happens within the Christian community here in the UK to Ghana, you cannot accept the fact that we will say that the British had an influence on our Christian faith. Because if they have abandoned certain things, why do we hold dear to them? I don't know if somebody wants to follow up on that. We've got barely 15 minutes, and there should be some 2 minutes for Alex to give his concluding statement. So if you have questions, comments, please feel free. Any follow-ups?
Well, I think I would like to make an observation. I think, well, just like we're highlighting the core confusion that we do have, I think it's also another confused aspect that we also have in the African or sub-African setup, because sometimes I've heard it, and maybe we do it consciously or unconsciously. Sometimes we talk about religion, by natural fact, we are meaning Christianity. But if you, so in a way, we are using those two words interchangeably, which in reality shouldn't be. And I think that whole confusion also shows the whole confused aspect in terms of what we have, in terms of our contextualization, in terms of everything that we got to do, because we have the same aspect. We could start with something that we're talking about. Let's say we're talking about we're talking about religion. But in reality, what we are talking or what we are saying, so we talk in between, and at the end, we're talking about Christianity. So we are assuming that religion is Christianity, but it's not. Yeah, if you're having to look at it from that point of view. So I think that also contributes a factor to some of the whole aspects where we're getting confused with some of those. So
and Michael, if I may, if you throw in the phrase spirituality, then it gets worse. If you add spirituality to religion and Christianity and other, it gets worse. Maybe I will ask one more practical question. When I begin to reflect on all of these things, and in the case of the things we've done in the past, the question is, where do we go from here? Because it seems to me that we here, the question would be, what do we have? how can we change things? Well, I mean, is there any little practical way? Anyone wants to chip in?
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, I think that's a very, very crucial question. I think Fred and I were in a conference in Ghana. That's how we met, 2019. And part of the conference pretty much focused on faith and business. And the narrative was that most of us as Africans, or even the entrepreneurs in Africa, do business and do not integrate faith into it. Look, I've been to India to do research in India for a couple of weeks. And you see the faith of the people on, basically, if you like, to permit me to use the word, an insurance word, on the rights, everything they do, So for us, as people who teach students, we need to be able to communicate the value of what we have as Africans to the students, so that when they go back there, we are not ashamed of who we are and what we have got. That it's good to start with. I taught international business module this semester from January to April, and what I taught most of the students were from Nigeria, and I told them, look, I am not going to give you this westernized based theories. I'm going to contextualize what we do and make it relevant to Africa. And most of the models and concepts I use authors from Ghana, Nigeria, from Africa, or those who have done some work on Africa. And that's what I use. And I told them, look, you are free to choose any Western-based theory that you think are relevant, but you need to look at what really matters to you. So I think one easy way is, because we are the ones producing the students, is to get them to think about what we have and what we can do with it. That's number one. And also number two, our entrepreneurs. Incidentally, somebody emailed me yesterday, just out of the blue, that he's the director of a big organization in Ghana. He's coming for a conference in Huddersfield, and can we meet? And I thought, oh, brilliant! I want to go out go out with you for a lunch. So with that, my intention with that meeting is to basically begin to explain to him what we can do as Africans. As entrepreneurs, what do we do to change the situation? I think those are the two ways for students and then for entrepreneurs. Let me give others a chance to talk.
Sure. Any further comments, please? Because entrepreneurship rings an interesting bell. I mean, coming from my first degree was in agricultural science. And when I then drifted into agribusiness and related subjects, I asked myself, why is it that people that were primarily planting crops that yielded in about 6 months at most decided to go for cash crops? I'm talking about Ghanaian cocoa farmers. They decided to go for cash crops that took 10 years before they got the first cocoa seeds. But these people are not recorded anywhere in the literature as entrepreneurs. But we say that entrepreneurs are risk takers as one of the attributes. But can you imagine such a situation? And this is not reflected in any academic textbook on entrepreneurship. And these people, we know, if you look at Ghana, places where saw massive infrastructure development, this is money from cocoa farmers. And cocoa farmers have bankrolled the whole country, the economy.
Yeah.
Right. Any comments, Enoch? And I see Galaxy O2. Do you have any comment, question, suggestion? All right.
I think my suggestion to the presenter is, I live in New York, and anytime I get visitors, I take them to go and see the wall. Have you been? Have you been to York?
No, I haven't.
Southeast. Yeah, it would be good to see York and what the early Christians did in York. And when they came in, they built a wall, and basically a small wall that they fortified and built a very massive church within the wall. And anyone who lives of the wall was seen as an outcast. Now, when those guys saw that their trade was not being so much successful, some of the merchantmen moved. They moved to the US, and they built another wall called Wall Street. you know, and that's what they moved to New York. So when you come to York, you see the history is there. But you see what religion can do, that the West or the white took religion and built something around it. But if you go to Africa right now, you got all the big pastors and big prophets and all of that. What they do is just basically take money from people, impoverish them. So it's anyway, it's a concern.
Yeah, thanks
But
so
it would
much.
be good if you can come to York and see.
I would love to. Love to.
Yes, yes. Thanks so much, Dr. Adams. That reminds me, you know, my specialty with sustainability. I was so fascinated to watch a documentary on Thailand, you know, and they have a national religion, right, that believes in the fact that humans do not have any kind of superior authority or entitlement over all the inanimate things around. So you don't have a right more than the stone or a right more than the tree. And their environment has been preserved because of this belief. You see, so like Dr. Adams was saying, you can see the direct reflection of what they believe. But I don't think we need to lose the point, because the point is that what we are talking about as Christian belief, according to the work of Alex, that is just an overall that we are wearing over all the other more kind of closely knitted issues about ethnicity, economic issues, and political authority. Yes. So we don't need to also lose that point, that it is just kind of the aesthetics.
Yes.
You feel bad if you don't portray that you are also religious or you are a Christian. Let me put it that way. All right. Now,
but just to add to that, I mean, that will become something based on the value that we've placed on it. So if Christianity has been placed, values been placed on it in terms of identity or the clout that gives you, then that's how we are going to take it. Then we are not going to take the whole aspect. That's why I say the perspective in terms of how we see it is what is fashioning our identity in a way. So if that is how we are seeing it, that it's something that gains us access to our socialization or gains us access in terms of society, then we are, because I recall when I was in secondary school, I saw all brilliant people in the scripture union, you know, because they spent the day and indulged themselves and all that thing. So they went to scripture union, and I saw that they were successful in their studies. So at the end of the day, everyone you wanted to run away from seniors and everything, you got into the scripture union. So for me, it wasn't going for Christianity. It was going for the status and going for my integration in terms of the societal system or the group up there. And through there, I got the gospel, I got the true message, and got transformed. So I would say that will also depend in terms of how we see the whole thing, that there will be our access in terms of, and if that is what is happening in your study, then that's what is showing in terms of the clothing that people have to have, because that's the access that we require in terms of our societal formation.
Wonderful. I mean, PLO once mentioned that we use it as a gown to cover our moral nakedness. But that is also something that we could interrogate going forward. Let's give the last minute to Alex to just give us his concluding statement, and then we can call it a day.
Well, honestly, I really want to thank you from bottom of my heart. It's been incredibly insightful. The comments, the genuineness of interest, and of course, it sounds really you are close to the concerns everywhere in the world, where we need Christianity to be solution to so many sector of life. It's something which I really leave as a question for you. It's general, it became a curiosity as I'm researching this, is really the transcendent nature of Christianity real in competing in very economically, ethnically, and the politically competing world, especially Africa. Is that transcendent nature of Christianity when we say that we have received Jesus and we became a new creature? You know, is that how that is real? How do we live that? I think that's something which I can leave with you. And for a final point, really, some of our initial thought I have now is really looking at how do we create civil society actions where Christianity values and ideas of peace are significant motivation of building peace. And what about public theology of peace? And we're saying, can Africa create people well, we already had one, Desmond Tutu. I don't know much about many people in West Africa, but can we create people like Martin Luther King who are teaching no violence, but basing that on biblical values? Hybrid religious building is really something that we should be looking at. And I'm always curious to know how Saint Egidio in Mozambique succeeded. And when I look at the background of Saint Egidio, there were people really a huge center, which had value almost like Mother Teresa type of values. Especially the only difference is that Saint Egidio was almost like a research center. He had a resource, but the values were incredibly around love, things that we love and compassion. And I think that combination of being a huge resource that had financial resource and supported by Vatican, and they became a mentor to Mozambican bishop who could probably have played, I'm assuming here, I'm really apologize, who could have been also entangled in conflict in Mozambique. So I'm seeing that it could happen in other places as well. How do we create places like those ones that combine? We cannot dismiss international actors like that. How can we combine something that become almost like a witness? We are witness for Congolese. We are witness for Ghanaian. We are witness for other people outside from the tribal context, who we share Christian identity, but they have to be not behaving like a UN. They have to be not behaving like EU. They have very simple foundational values of love between one another. And I'm also suggesting something quite controversial. I'm suggesting to fund religious peace, to fund it. If UN is using 1.5 billion a year in Congo, I'm sure just 2% of that going to traditional leaders and pastors, you found their month to change. You are corrupting those people. I know it sounded almost kind of using the wrong word, immoral word, but you are actually giving them funding abilities to speak about peace when they could not because of other identity they are attached to for money reason.
That's interesting. That's an interesting thought.
Yes.
Yeah.
And the last of that is synods. We have so many conferences in Canterbury where I live. The Archbishop of Canterbury brings so many people from all over the world. All of the countries have representation. But I doubt, because of fear of being imperial, being colonial, they're asking African, what's going on in your home? How are you dealing with it? That's my first point, really. Thank you.
Wonderful, wonderful. Thanks so much. And let me now use this opportunity to also express my sincere thanks to all those that have tuned in to listen. The contributions and the suggestions are great. The questions. Hopefully, we'll come your way next month with another conversation. Alex, if you don't mind, and you want to maybe put your email address in the chat in case somebody has a suggestion that they want you to also consider, I think that would be great. So until we come your way again next month, where we're going to have another conversation on how faith impacts society, I'm going to sign off here, and thank you so much. And I hope you have a wonderful, productive week. Bye for now. Bye-bye.